At a train station in Odessa, there are tearful goodbyes as families separate. Some passengers on this night train are on their way to safety. Among them is Lyudmila Lichko and her 2 sons.
We were all scared because it was already uncalm for several days. For several times a day, the air raid sirens. There were already airstrikes where we lived. The neighboring village suffered a lot from bombing. And since our house is on the outskirts, the shrapnel could directly reach us. It was terrifying. That's why we decided to leave. It was very dangerous.
Lichko's husband Dennis stayed behind.
It was very hard. It was very hard for us to separate, but we were just forced to leave. It is impossible to live in such conditions the whole time.
Passengers on the train make small talk. Some have brought pets. The night train is just one step in the Lichko family's journey. Already on a bus before the train from Odessa, they board another at Izmail. It takes them to a port on the Danube where they get on a ferry to Romania.
We plan to go to Poland. We have relatives that live there. They can take us in for some time. Further on, if the situation calms down and everything will be fine, the situation will be fine for sure, we will return to our home.
Russia denies targeting civilians in what it is calling a special operation in Ukraine. The United Nations says nearly 6.5 million people have been uprooted in the war, exceeding its worst forecasts.
This is Tetyana Chornovol, a former nationalist member of parliament who is now fighting in frontline trenches, working as an anti-tank guided missile operator just north of Kiev. Here, she describes her most recent hit.
I switched it on and saw tanks on the screen. They just entered within the range of my missile. I took aim and destroyed the first tank. Interestingly, the rocket was flying for quite some time. Perhaps the tanks registered the rocket's launch and managed to turn back, but I shot it right at the fuel tanks and the ammunition load has detonated. The tank literally flew off the road and now it is somewhere in the road ditched in the forest. After that we came under fire, not for long. All during this time Russian military vehicles were turning back and escaping. So one destroyed tank was enough to stop the attack for the column to turn back and run away.
A high-profile anti-corruption campaigner, Tetyana, who is also a former journalist, was one of the leaders in the Euromaidan protests. She turned to politics in 2014 and was elected a member of the nationalist and conservative People's Front Party. But now she's part of a unit tasked with engaging and destroying Russian tanks and armoured vehicles to stop its approach on the Ukrainian capital. Tetyana is a war widow herself. Her husband, Mykola Berezovy, served as a volunteer fighter in the right-wing paramilitary Azov battalion. He was killed during fighting in eastern Ukraine in 2014.
I hope that you will see how much I love our country and the Constitution and the rights that make us free.
The historic Senate confirmation hearing for Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson began Monday with Jackson, who would become the first Black woman ever to serve on the High Court, pledging to defend American democracy with impartiality.
I decide cases from a neutral posture. I evaluate the facts, and I interpret and apply the law to the facts of the case before me without fear or favor, consistent with my judicial oath.
Jackson was nominated in February by President Joe Biden, who as a candidate in 2020 pledged to appoint a Black woman to the court. Democrats hailed her selection as a major inflection point for the country.
The appointment of a Black woman to the court means that your service will make the court look more like America. Hopefully, too, it will make the court think more like America.
We won't try to turn this into a spectacle.
Republicans promised civility, But some went on the attack, most notably Marsha Blackburn, who pushed hardest on the belief by some Republicans that Jackson, a former public defender, is soft on crime.
I can only wonder, what's your hidden agenda? Is it to let violent criminals, cop killers, and child predators back to the streets?
Democrats jumped to her defense.
Judge Jackson is not anti-law enforcement. She hails from a law enforcement family. And no, she's not soft on crime.
Jackson, who would replace retiring liberal Justice Stephen Breyer, faces questions from senators on Tuesday and Wednesday in what is likely to be a battle in the closely divided Senate. A simple majority vote is needed for her confirmation.
U.S. stocks fell on Monday after Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell hinted at a more aggressive plan for future rate hikes, adding to ongoing uncertainties related to the war in Ukraine. All three major U.S. stock indexes snapped their four-session winning streaks, with the Dow ending down more than 0.5%, the S&P finishing only slightly lower, and the Nasdaq closing down 0.4%. Oppenheimer's chief investment strategist John Stolfus.
Today we're testing some of the good performance that we saw in the markets last week when U.S. stocks, major indices were up anywhere up on the week, anywhere between 5 to as high as 8% in the case of the Nasdaq. So today there's a little bit of give back. Some of that directly related to the fact that Jerome Powell, speaking at an event, said that the Fed would be willing to be more aggressive if it was required.
Powell said on Monday that the Fed must move expeditiously to combat inflation in remarks before the National Association of Business Economics conference, adding that bigger than usual interest rate hikes could be deployed if needed, leading many investors to believe that a 50 basis point hike in key interest rates at the Fed's next meeting was likely. Crude prices rose as the EU waged joining the U.S. in banning Russian oil, which raised supply concerns and helped push energy shares higher. The rising geopolitical temperature also helped defense stocks. Shares of Boeing fell after one of its aircraft operated by China Eastern Airlines crashed in southern China with no apparent survivors. And a Moscow court labeled Meta Platforms an extremist organization on Monday, upholding a decision to ban Facebook in Russia. Shares of Meta ended down more than 2%.
We've previously warned about the potential for Russia to conduct cyber attacks against the United States, including as a response to the unprecedented economic costs that the U.S. and allies and partners impose in response to Russia's further invasion of Ukraine. Today, we are reiterating those warnings, and we're doing so based on evolving threat intelligence that the Russian government is exploring options for potential cyber attacks on critical infrastructure in the United States. To be clear, there is no certainty there will be a cyber incident on critical infrastructure. So why am I here? Because this is a call to action and a call to responsibility for all of us.